Hi, welcome back to Nutrition in the Kitchen. My name is Tara Kenyon and I'm a nutritionist here at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Broome County. We are here today at the Commercial Kitchen at the Broome County Regional Farmers Market at 840 Upper Front Street in Binghamton. And today we are making garden risotto. We thought this would be a perfect dish for this time of year because the fresh vegetables that we're using today are cold weather crops and they can be planted now and harvested to use in this recipe. So what we need for garden risotto is 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I have a half teaspoon of salt and a half teaspoon of pepper. This recipe actually didn't call for any garlic, but that means here at Cornell Cooperative Extension that we add 5 cloves of garlic. And we need a half cup of dry white wine. If you don't have dry white wine, that's okay. I'll come back to it later when we talk about the broth. The recipe called for a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese, but we actually decided to use a half cup to make it a little bit cheesier and creamier. We need a half pound of asparagus, and I'm going to come back later and talk about how to prepare the asparagus for this dish. We have a 1 cup of peas. We're just using frozen peas today, but if you have peas that you're growing in your garden, you can easily use fresh peas. We have 1 cup of, 1 medium onion, probably more than a cup, but 1 medium onion chopped, and 1½ cups of arborio rice. I'm going to talk about that type of rice a little bit later. And 3 cups of baby spinach. You don't have to chop the spinach, we just gave it a little loose chop to help it wilt better in the pan. And finally, you need 4½ cups of low sodium chicken broth. So if you did not have dry white wine, you can replace it with an additional ½ cup of low sodium chicken broth. So that means you would need 5 cups altogether. So let's begin. The first thing we want to do is get our onion sauteing in the pan. So I'm going to put our oil in the pan with the onion, and we'll give that a quick stir. We want to make sure that the onion cooks until it's translucent, so maybe a minute or 2. While the onion is cooking, we can get the chicken broth ready. You want to make sure that the broth stays hot throughout this entire recipe. So what I have is a pot on the stove, and I'm just going to turn that on, and then pour in all of the chicken broth, and keep that going the entire time I'm preparing the risotto. So you need to prepare the asparagus ahead of time for this recipe. So you have a couple options. You can steam your asparagus. We decided to just pan fry it until it was cooked but still crispy. Then you can take the asparagus, let it cool, and cut it into 3/4 inch pieces, and then just set it aside. You're not going to use it again until the end of the recipe. So make sure that you prepare that ahead of time. So the onions are starting to cook and get translucent. Our next step will be to add in the garlic and the arborio rice. Arborio rice is not regular rice. You don't want to use just traditional white rice. This is an Italian rice that is going to be firmer and creamier when it is cooked. So it's always used for risotto. Sometimes they use it in rice pudding as well. So I'm going to add the dry rice to the pan with garlic. And we're going to continuously stir that for another minute or 2. And then we're going to add the salt and pepper and the dry white wine. And if you didn't have the dry white wine, this is where you would be adding in just a half cup of chicken broth instead. So everything is cooking, starting to get a little bit more translucent in color. I'm going to add in the salt and pepper. And stir that in, and then now I'm going to add the half cup of white wine. Now you want to stir this until all of the white wine has been absorbed by the rice. So really cook it off. And the trick with cooking risotto is that we're going to be adding the chicken broth just a half cup to 1 cup at a time. So we're going to be slowly adding it in, and each time that we add in a cup of the chicken broth, we have to make sure that the broth gets completely absorbed by the rice before adding in another cup. And you're going to continue with that process until you've used all of the broth up, or until the rice is cooked but still al dente. And this can take maybe 15 or 20 minutes to do to completion. So all the white wine has been cooked off. So now we're going to add the chicken broth just 1 cup at a time. And you want to make sure that you are stirring completely the entire time that the broth is in the pan. So you can see that I put 1 cup in and it's starting to already be absorbed by the rice. And once that's complete, we will add another cup of broth. Now, this process is going to take about 15 to 20 minutes, so like usual, we have it already complete, so I'm just going to add another cup of broth, and then I'm going to set this one aside. And you can see when you've added all the broth that we start to get really creamy looking and really more soft but still al dente. So now it's time to add all of our fresh vegetables and our cheese. So I'm just going to let this heat up, and I'm going to add the 3 cups of chopped spinach. And really all we need to do here is let the vegetables heat up and cook through with the risotto. So the spinach is going to wilt. And I'm going to add in our ½ pound of chopped asparagus and 1 cup of frozen peas, or fresh peas if you are using fresh. And just give that a stir. This dish is really great for this time of year because it is full of greens, so it looks also really pretty. And then finally, the ½ cup of grated Parmesan cheese. And it's almost ready. Now we're going to plate it. This makes about 8 servings. So depending on how much you serve, you should be able to feed 8 people with this recipe. Okay? And there you have it. We have garden risotto. So we were featuring spinach today. And spinach is in abundance right now at the farmer's market. You can come down every Saturday from 9 to 1, and there are several of our vendors that have spinach available, as well as a lot of the other fresh ingredients that we used here. But spinach is a really nutrient-dense green. It's full of vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin K, iron, magnesium, and calcium as well. It's a member of the same family as beets and Swiss chard, and all three of them are high in calcium, but the calcium is bound to oxalic acid, which makes it a little bit more difficult for your body to get the calcium from it in its raw form. So that's why we recommend that you also include cooked spinach in your diet. By cooking the spinach, you're helping to release it from the oxalic acid and make it easier for your body to absorb it. Now that doesn't mean don't eat raw spinach, because a lot of the nutrients are going to be more abundant when left raw, like some of those water-soluble vitamins. So we recommend, having a spinach salad, but also maybe throwing in some cooked spinach in your eggs or in the garden risotto like we made today. Thank you for joining us for Nutrition in the Kitchen, and we look forward to seeing you next time.